Alrighty, let's do this. In this video, I want to talk about all of the reasons, according to research, that people who are happy at work are more successful in their careers. I think this is such an important topic, and there is so much fascinating research out there on this. I have 4 topics prepared. First of all, I want to talk about the biggest and worst myth in career thinking, in how people think about their work, about their careers, because I think this word myth is doing a lot of damage to people. Secondly, I want to talk about all of the areas where happy people are in fact more successful in their careers and exactly why. Uh, I've identified 8 of them. There are probably more, but going through all of the research, those are the ones I've been able to find. Um, I want to balance this a little bit with talk about, are there any downsides to being happy at work? And it turns out there might be a few, but spoiler alert, the advantages by far outweigh the disadvantages of happiness at work. And finally, I want to talk about how we use this to inspire action. I'm going to keep this short, punchy, and hopefully fun. We'll be done in 30 minutes. I'll be happy to take any questions. So if you have any questions, write a comment on the video, and I'll be happy to answer those as we go along at the end of the presentation. Um, but first of all, why does this topic matter? Why should we care if happy people are indeed more successful in their careers? Well, as I said, I think it goes to the one of the worst myths, probably the worst and most common and most damaging myth about work and about our careers. Which let me introduce a little bit of Latin here. Per aspera ad astra. I'm sure you all know Latin, but just in case you don't, this means through suffering or hardship to the stars. Astra, star, aspera, hardship, toughness, adversity, that kind of thing. And this is how a lot of people think about work. And this especially how a lot of people think about success, that if you want to reach the stars, if you want success in your careers, you have to go through a lot of hardship, a lot of problems, a lot of toughness. You have to be strong, you have to be resilient, you have to fight for it if you want it, right? And not only is that a way to get to the stars, to achieve success, I think in many people's minds, it's the only way. You will not achieve success unless you suffer for it, unless you fight for it, unless you go through all of this adversity, toughness, troubles, right? Um, I think a very illustrative way example of this is to look at, what do we call, the salary we give people, all of the things we give them for their hard work. We call that compensation, right? That's the sort of the umbrella term for all of the stuff you get for going to work. It's weird. It's to compensate you for the time you spent, for the energy you give, for how much of your life you must give up, like for sacrificing your private life, your family life, time with your children, time with your hobbies, time with your friends. So work takes away from you. This shows, and then it compensates you by giving you money. And I think so many people are stuck in this worldview, that this is how they see work. And I think in many cases, you can think that it's per aspera ad astra, through suffering to the stars. But in my opinion, in my experience, very often it's per aspera ad aspera. It's through suffering to more suffering. Because if that's how you expect your career to be, that is probably most likely how it will be, because that is how you approach it. And I want to make this very clear. At the core of it, this is not only damaging, it hurts a lot of people's careers, it hurts a lot of people's lives. It's also very clearly wrong. And it turns out that being happy at work is actually great for your career, and suffering at work is actually likely to hurt your career. And we're going to talk about why. And I'm not just making this up. There is a ton of research on this. Here's probably the seminal, the article that delves into this, the first and the best, by Ed Diener and several others. The benefits of frequent positive effect. Let me enlarge that a little bit. The benefits of frequent positive effect. Does happiness lead to success? And one thing, here's sort of the money quote from this article, which is that numerous studies show that happy individuals are successful across multiple life domains, including marriage, friendship, income, work, performance, and health. So if you have this idea that it's through suffering that you achieve success, well, this article is here to prove you wrong. and saying is actually, if you're happy, you have more success in all of these domains. And I just want to make something very important. A very important point about this article is that it looks at positive affect, which is psychologists speak for positive emotions. So it's not like, are you in general satisfied with your life? It is, uh, are you often experiencing positive emotion, frequent positive effect? Do you spend a lot of your time experiencing positive emotions? And that's exactly how we define happiness at work. It's about how you feel about your job. It's your emotional state most of the time at work. And of course, feeling good at work is nice, but it turns out it's not only nice, it gives a large number of career benefits. And we're going to look at all of those. Um, so like I say, the most damaging myth is this per aspera ad astra, that the only way to success, the only way to the stars is through suffering. There's another also quite damaging myth, which is that the only way to happiness is through success, right? That if you work hard and you achieve career success, all of the money, all of the status, everything, all the, the stuff that comes with that, that'll make you happy. Also a very common myth. Turns out that that's not really true. And the opposite is true, that if you are happy, that will lead to success in many, many aspects of life, including in your career. So that's what we're going to look at here. I've identified, like I said, 8 different areas, 8 different reasons why happy people have more career success. And let's go through them one by one and talk about the research that shows that this is true. Reason number 1 is that feeling happy boosts your mind. Your mind works better, more effectively when you're in a good mood than when you're in a bad mood. All right. I'll just one study on this that I thought was very practical and very interesting was done at the University of Warwick, where they took people in and they gave them a task. It was one of the tasks was very boring, like add 5 2-digit numbers in your head and see if you come up with the right result, right? And then they took some of the volunteers and treated them with happiness. In this case, they showed them a funny 10-minute video of a comedian telling jokes. That was it. And then it turned out that the people who saw that funny video were now a little happier. They measured that, and they performed 12% better on average on such a boring task as adding 2-digit numbers. By the way, they were also more resilient and tried harder, made more of an effort on the same task. So it turns out that our minds work better when we're in a good mood. One of my favorite examples of a study that looked at this was a study where they used the Dunkirk candlestick problem, which is a study in creative thinking. If you don't know the Dunkirk candlestick problem, it's very simple. You get you were in a room and there's a bunch of box of thumbtacks, a candle, and some matches. And your task, you have 3 minutes. Your task is to figure out to somehow stick the candle to the wall and light it in a way that wax doesn't drip on the table or the floor. You give people 3 minutes, and it turns out that on average, 19% of people find the solution. By the way, have you figured out the solution? Do you know the Dunkirk candlestick problem? It's a classic. This is the solution. You tip out all of the thumbtacks from the box. Then you stick the box to the wall using the thumbtacks, and then you put the candle on there and light it. That's interesting. In this study, they actually found that 19% on average managed to complete it within 3 minutes. But if they made people happy just before solving the task, in this case, by giving them positive feedback, meaningful positive feedback from somebody who knew them, now 51% managed to solve the problem inside the 3-minute time cap. Yeah. By the way, when you do give people this problem, some people get like very, very creative. I think this is a hilarious solution. Not a correct solution, though. So we know for a fact that being in a positive emotional state, feeling happy, feeling good is great for your mind. And I think the seminal article on this is this one by Barbara Fredrickson, where she introduces the broaden and build theory and essentially points out that when you're in a positive mental state, your mind is more open to new ideas, new thoughts, new experiences, to other people, and so on and so on. You learn faster when you're in a positive mood, which is, by the way, super interesting for schools and educational institutions. And I think this is really, really interesting. So it turns out that again, when you're stressed, when you're worried, when you're angry, your mind is more closed. It does not function as well. There's probably she postulates that there is a an evolutionary reason for this. That in evolutionary history, there would have been times where your tribe is under threat. Predatory animals are attacking your tribe, and that in that sense, in that situation, you don't want your mind to be open. You just want to fight for your survival. But then there are other times where there are no threats. The sun is shining, your tribe is having a quiet day, and maybe on those days it will be super good for your survival and for the good of the tribe if you were able to think of new ideas for like how to make food or how to make fire or whatever. So that is probably an evolutionary explanation for why our minds just work better. They're broader when we are in a good mood, when we experience positive emotions. So that was reason number one. It's good for your brain to be happy. Reason number two is that happy people work better together. If you've ever worked with somebody who just clearly hated their job, I think you know exactly what I mean. There's a ton of research on this. Here's a study called Positive Feelings, Reward and Promotes Pro-Social Behavior. And the main claim of this study is this: that there's research evidence showing that that various positive states prompt pro-social behavior, and pro-social action also leads to positive states. So there's like a double effect here, or a circular effect, in that if you are feeling happy, you're more likely to help others. But also, if you help others, you're more likely to feel happy. So the question is, which comes first here? And they've done some studies on that. One of my favorite kinds of studies is they take volunteers into a lab. They give them a questionnaire to measure how happy they are right now. And then they tell them, thank you so much for filling out the questionnaire. The second part of the study takes place in another room. Please exit through this door, walk down the hallway, second door on the right, go there now. And then in the hallway, as they're going to the next part of the study, that's where the real study takes place, because there's maybe somebody drops a lot of papers and needs help picking them up. Maybe there's somebody collecting money for charity. Maybe somebody drops something and they want help. And then the real study is, do you stop and help? And it turns out that the happier people are on average, the more likely they are to help. So we know that feeling good causes pro-social behavior. And we know that pro-social behavior, by the way, causes people to feel good. Specifically, we know that when people are happy, they are more helpful towards others, more generous, more likely to share their knowledge, more empathetic, more able to put themselves in other people's shoes, and more caring towards others. In general, I think it's very, very clear to say that happiness boosts pro-social behavior, and in a wider context, just happiness makes you a better person. You're just like a better citizen, a better person, a better friend, a better family member, a better parent when you are feeling happy than when you're not. And this is especially relevant in the workplace, where very few people work on their own. Almost everything we achieve in the workplace, we achieve together. And if we can be caring, if we can help each other, support each other, share our knowledge, share our ideas, boost each other, then we can create much better results together. And if you can do that because you're happy, then you will have a much more successful career. Tip number three, reason number three why happy people are more successful in their careers is that happy people are more optimistic. There's this slogan is probably like the foundation of 90% of everything I've ever done in my life. I love this so much. We do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it would be easy. Optimism, this idea, this feeling that, you know what, it's going to work out. I can do this. I believe in myself. If I do this, it'll probably work. If I have any problems along the way, I'll probably find a solution. That optimism makes people take action. It makes people believe in themselves. Optimism is also associated with a longer lifespan. By the way, being an optimist is good. And we know that when people are in a good mood, they are more optimistic. Some people have a natural optimistic disposition. Those people are amazing. But there's also like a momentary effect here, is that if you're having a good day today, then you're more likely to be optimistic today, and you are more likely to take action towards achieving your goals today. Yeah. So, and that is clearly good for your career, as opposed to, giving up in advance because you don't believe that it'll work out. You're pessimistic. I could try, but it won't work. I could do this, but it's probably, there are so many problems. So yeah, optimism is absolutely a career advantage, and happy people are more optimistic. There was a classic study done in, I do believe that was Finland, where they took some volunteers, they gave them a heavy backpack, and then they put them at the bottom of the hill, and they asked them, how long do you think it'll take you to walk to the top of this hill with this heavy backpack? And then they for some of the volunteers, right before they were supposed to go up, they played them some Mozart, some light, happy music to make them in a good mood. And those people were like, I can make that in 5 minutes. And with some of the other volunteers, they played something heavy, like depressing classical music, like Mahler or something. And those people are like, oh my God, I'll never make it up there. It'll take like 20 minutes. So yeah, so being happy, feeling good makes you optimistic, and being optimistic makes you take action, which is great for your career. Reason number 4, we also know that happy people are more resilient. Of course, you're going to face setbacks. Of course, there are going to be problems. Of course, not everything is going to work out the way you think. But if you are happy, you are more likely to handle those setbacks and problems in a productive and constructive way. And there are two effects here. There's an immediate and a long-term effect. So the immediate effect, if you're having a good day today, you're at work, you're feeling great, you like your job, you like your coworkers, you're happy at work, and some kind of problem occurs, well, you're more likely to just, okay, I can deal with this, and then just take action or seek help to get that problem solved. If you're having a bad day at work, if you hate your job, you're more likely to, oh my God, maybe just give up in advance, or maybe you know that's somebody else's problem and not do anything about it. So there's an immediate effect that right here and right now, you're more likely to handle setbacks and problems. But there's also a long term effect. And that goes back to the broaden and build theory that I talked about earlier. It's the build part, in that frequent positive emotions build up your resources. They make you more resilient to stress and burnout. They make you better able to handle any problems that come along, also in the long term. This is a fascinating article on this. Happiness Unpacked. Uh, positive emotions increase life satisfaction by building resilience. So there's a clear effect here that if you are generally happy at work, then you will be more resilient. And we know that people who are happy at work are less prone to stress and burnout, and people who hate their jobs are way more prone to burning out on the job. Yes. Reason number 5: happy people get less sick. There's a very clear correlation in the research here. And we know that specifically, we know that people who are unhappy at work are much more likely to get sick. And these can be quite serious diseases: strokes, heart disease, some forms of cancer, stress and depression, anxiety, that kind of thing. So, and of course, not getting sick is great for your career, right? Whereas, burning out and having to take 6 months off work because you're completely stressed is terrible for your career. So that's another career advantage that you get when you are happy at work. Reason number 6 is that happiness is contagious. There's something called emotional contagion. We know that when you're in a room with people, their emotions affect you, and your emotions affect them. So if you're in a good mood, you tend to make people around you happy. If you're in a terrible mood, you have a negative effect on other people's moods. By the way, we know that negative emotions are more contagious, probably because of negativity bias, which is this tendency our mind has to focus more on the negative than on the positive. So this emotional contagion is super interesting, because it means that if you're in a good mood, if you're happy at work generally, I mean, again, nobody's happy every day, but if you're generally happy at work, you will make people around you happy. When you make them happy, they will like you. They will feel good around you. They will seek out your company. They will want to help you because you're a nice, kind, cheerful person. And you are more likely to get support from others when you need it, right? You're more likely to have them help you if you need it, if you're generally a happy person. On the other hand, if you're always complaining, if you're always negative, if you're always in a bad mood, you'll have that negative effect on others, and it'll be stronger than the positive effect because of negativity bias. And people will often try to avoid your presence altogether. And if you do need help, you may have to force them, you may have to coerce them, and people won't want to help you voluntarily because you make them feel bad. So this is a super interesting effect that I think is vastly underrated, and it's very very. I've definitely worked with people who had that negative attitude, and I did everything I could to avoid, even being in the same room as them, because it just feels bad. Everything looks worse when you're around them. So this emotional contagion, make when you're happy, you make other people happy. Fantastic effect. Somewhat underrated, in my opinion. Two more reasons why happy people have more career success. First of all, when you're happy at work, you make your customers happy. You may not have customers in your specific position. Maybe you have internal customers, maybe you have external customers. But if you do have any kind of customers, like I do, if you're happy, again, emotional contagion that rubs off on them, but also you do a better job. There's this fascinating book called The Service Profit Chain, which says that when people are happy at work, they give great service. They just do that naturally because they're happy and they want the customers to be happy. On the other hand, have you ever walked into a business where every single employee clearly hated their life and hated their job? You're probably not going to get great customer service there. So they found that when people are happy, they give great customer service. That makes the customers happy, makes the customers loyal. They come back, and that makes the business grow faster. This is hardly rocket science, and there are definitely restaurants here in Copenhagen where I live. I've gone in where people were just unhappy at work, and I just never go back. I don't want to be there. And on the other hand, there are restaurants where the staff are clearly having the time of their life. They like each other. They work well together. They make jokes with the customers, and those are the places I tend to seek out again and again and again. And finally, reason number 8 why happy employees, why happiness at work is good for you, is that happy employees care more about their work. It is very clear that if you hate your job, your boss is a jerk, and your coworkers are always unhappy and miserable and always complaining. It's very, very hard to care about the actual work you do. However, if you're in a workplace where you're treated well, you like the work, you like the people you work with, then you're much more likely to actually care about the company and the work itself. This book, The Progress Principle, shows that very clearly, based on research from the real world, from people working on real projects in real companies. And it showed very, very clearly that when people were happy at work, they were more engaged in what they did and did a better job. And that's what we know very clearly from the research, is that when people are happy, they give higher discretionary effort, which is like going above and beyond, both in terms of time, but also in terms of effort and ideas. They want to contribute. You don't have to, threaten them with punishment or promise rewards every time you want people to do something. They just get the work done because they actually care about the work itself. They're happy at work, so they care about the workplace and they want the workplace to achieve its goals. We know that people who are happy at work are more motivated, which I think is fantastic. Again, you don't have to motivate them all the time. They're motivated intrinsically. They're motivating themselves, and they care about the company's goals, which I think is so important. So those are the 8 reasons why, according to the research, 8 reasons I can find why being happy at work makes you more successful in your career. Are there any downsides to happiness? Yes, there are 3 that I could find. First of all, if you are happy at work, you may be perceived as less professional or less intelligent. They've done some interesting studies where they showed volunteers like a speech written down, and then they asked people to assess the intelligence of the person who wrote that speech. And one version of the speech was written to be for a topic, and another version of that speech was identical but written to be against the topic. And people rated the intelligence of the against writer as higher on average than the for writer. Is this, if you're negative, if you're against stuff, you look more intelligent to some people. They're obviously wrong. I mean, again, happy people do a better job. They are more professional. They are more intelligent. Their minds work better. But there could be a perception in society that if you're happy, you're probably maybe a little stupid, maybe a little naive, maybe a little unprofessional. I think that's dumb, but some people do have that perception, and you may face that. That might be a drawback to being happy at work. There is some indication that people who are happy at work are less detail oriented. Again, their minds may be broader. So if there's one tiny little detail they need to focus on, Like there's an example where they had to go through text, like a tightly written text on a page, and cross out all the E's. It turned out the people who are in a good mood performed slightly worse on that task, maybe because their mind was broader, so they had a harder time focusing on that very specific, detail-oriented task. And finally, people who are happy are more optimistic, as we said, but that means they're also maybe more likely to overlook risks. So if you do have a happy workplace, maybe once in a while, get people together and say, hey, what risks are we maybe ignoring in our team, in our work, in our workplace that we also need to address? So these are the possible downsides that I know of from the research of happiness at work, and you should be on the lookout for these. But I think the benefits by far outweigh the cons here. Cool. So the research is very, very clear. If you're happy at work, you do better work. That's going to be great for your career. How do we apply this knowledge? What do we do about it? Well, we can do it. We can focus on this in our workplaces, obviously, right? As Carrie Cooper from Manchester University says, there is a significant amount of evidence that organizations with high personal well-being get better results, or to put it in a different way, happy companies make more money. So we can definitely, in our companies, we can use this knowledge to make sure that we create workplaces where people are happy at work, where people experience many positive emotions. Again, nobody's going to be happy every single day, but people can be happy most days. One of my favorite quotes, a conductor, this is Ben Zander, who used to be the conductor of the Boston Philharmonics. And if you know classical music, you know that many conductors are dictators who rule with an iron fist. But he realized that, happy musicians play better music. They're more relaxed. They play better together. They listen more to what's going on around them. And when I interviewed him for one of my books, he said this: what makes an effective business is the same thing that makes an effective orchestra. People who want to be there, people who give everything they have, who are doing a wonderful time, having a wonderful time doing it, whose eyes are shining, who are giving out energy to the people around them. I think that's a phenomenal quote. So we can definitely use this to inspire actions in our workplaces to create better workplaces, but we can also use this knowledge to inspire ourselves and others to take action for ourselves, to prioritize our own happiness at work. And that's where this myth of per aspera ad astra is so damaging, right? Because if we have been indoctrinated with this idea that we can only achieve success through suffering, then we are much more likely to work in a way that causes suffering, to, give up time with our friends, families, and hobbies, to sacrifice our health for our careers, to sacrifice our time. And I think that's a huge mistake. So I think it's very, very important to open people's eyes. And even if you are a very career-oriented person, even if what you care about the most is having a successful career, achieving status, achieving a good income, just know that the best way to do that, according to the research, is very clear. It's not through suffering, it's through happiness. And that's why I think we need to change this per aspera ad astra to this one, per gaudium ad astra, which is Latin for through happiness to the stars. Beautiful. I hope you found this inspiring. If you want more information, I'm going to put my slides and some links to all of the research that I mentioned here in the webinar page and the video description. You please connect with me on LinkedIn. Please follow me on YouTube. Please subscribe to our newsletter. And most of all, if you want more inspiration for this on this for your workshop, for your workplace, book me to come speak. I'm in all modesty, I'm pretty awesome. The average rating out of 10 for my last 300 talks in various companies is 9.6. I'm very, very proud of that. Thank you so much. And I will now take your questions. So just checking to see if there are any questions. There is one, which is a great question. Where am I finding all this research? Yes, I have spent so much time on that because I don't want to be out there saying anything that isn't supported by science, right? That isn't supported by studies and research. My background is in engineering. Of course, I care about the data. Of course, I care about the numbers. So for me, there are three main sources. Google. I mean, Google is amazing. You can go into Google Scholar and specifically search for research articles. That's an amazing resource right there. Books. I have read, I don't know, probably 500 relevant business books on all kinds of topics. And there are like the more theoretical ones to introduce some concepts, and then there are like the more practical ones, like case studies on very happy organizations, to show you how all of this can be applied in practice. Those are two great kinds of books. And um, and I'll in the materials for this video, I'll put a link to my 20 favorite business books about happiness at work. And then Harvard Business Review is a fantastic resource. I think they promote so many of the scientists I mentioned here, the research I mentioned here. I found through them. Their website is fantastic. The magazine is great. I think it's probably the most forward-thinking business magazine these days. So I definitely recommend Harvard Business Review. Check it out. Again, thank you so much for watching, and stay happy.